Yo, we are back with another episode of the Unsilent Church podcast. We are in the building today on this election Tuesday.
Oh, it is super. Is it still called Super Tuesday?
No, that's
Super
a primary
Tuesday.
season.
Oh, primaries. Yeah. Oh, you can tell I don't follow this like this.
Now, I don't know
Make
when
sure you vote.
Yeah, go vote. I don't know when this is going to be.
Hopefully you voted. That's.
I don't know when this is going to be released or whatever, but it is today on November.
On the day of this recording, it's November 5th.
Yeah, so I voted early. Did y'all vote?
You don't have your sticker on.
Just because I don't have the sticker on, don't mean I didn't vote.
Hey man, if it ain't Facebook officially.
Well, anyways, we are here. We got Pastor Ramon in the building. What's going on?
What's up, man?
We got James in the building.
Hello. Hey man, I'm proud of us. We were here before 9 o'clock.
Before 9.
Like we were all grown ups today. I'm so happy.
Like Nueve.
Glad you're proud.
Hey, it feels like maturity takes a long time, but we got here.
And we got a special guest in the building, but I'll let Pastor V, you want to introduce our special guest today?
Well, we're really happy to have really my good friend, Greg Esser. I think I've known you almost 20 years or so, since the start of the church. And we have Greg in to talk about something that fits a topic we've been hitting a couple times throughout this season, sort of the main theme of some of the last few episodes we've done, which is a little while back, was this idea of sort of stigmas, things that issues that people aren't aware of or maybe dismiss, don't pay attention to. And Greg did something pretty crazy. You made a huge life change later on in life to become a lawyer, and particularly to become a lawyer to move into, I think, an area that we want people to be more aware of. So, Greg, let me talk a little bit about yourself and what you're involved with.
Currently, I am an assistant attorney general with the Attorney General's office here in Arizona, and that comes after a decades-long career in the arts, which is how I came to be involved with Roosevelt Row. So I'm following the opposite career path. A lot of lawyers retire to become artists. I'm an artist that has become a lawyer.
Yep.
So,
What type of artist was you?
I do printmaking. I make handmade greeting cards, which are for sale down the street at Made Art Boutique at 5th Street in Roosevelt.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Hey, tell it again. Say that louder for the people in the back. Made Phoenix. Where?
5th Street in Roosevelt.
There we go.
Right next to Greenwood.
Lots of great stuff there.
Okay, Greenwood. Yeah, I know exactly. Okay. Good.
That's amazing.
So the particular thing you're though especially involved with, and is the topic we want to talk about here, is you're involved in elder law, and that's as you explained to me before we started, that's a broad category of things. But the area you want to particularly focus on is the ways in which the elderly in our community are taken advantage of, neglected, abused, etc., which is a topic that when people say it, I think about it, and I've heard different aspects of it in the past, but it's hit me way more when it happened to Danae's grandmother, and that made me become way more aware of how real this is, and the, I think, outsized impact it can really have. So, Danae's grandmother got basically scammed. She got an email saying that her account got broken into, et cetera, and she had to do something immediately, otherwise she would lose her Amazon account forever and all these other things. And they said, you got to send us $3,000 and that will take care of everything. And so she did it, and I found out about it after the fact. And so I called the people who, I was able to track down the number of the people who called and even their emails. And I even did like a Google map thing, and I saw it was like some nondescript warehouse on the East Coast. I was like, this is not legit. And said, look, hey, what did you do? This is not legit. And the long story short, they got away with it because technically they did give her something. They gave her like some vaporware, some free anti-software stuff. They sold her, and so she's out
for $3,000.
For $3,000, and that's just one example. I know you have examples in your own life that are even worse. It'd be good just to share a little bit about what's going on, what the issue is.
So elder abuse is a growing crisis in this nation. It's a global crisis, and it cuts across race. It cuts across economic class. It's something that affects millions of Americans every year. And that's for a lot of reasons. But one of the primary reasons is that elderly people in this country control 85% of this nation's wealth. And as you age, there are cognitive impairments that come as part of the natural process of aging. And so it's the perfect crime. You've got somebody with some cognitive impairments. They've got assets. They're easy to target. And one of the biggest issues, and the thing as a community I think we need to be most aware of, is people with less social connections are more vulnerable than people. So if you're an elderly person living in an assisted living facility, maybe you've outlived your other family members, there's nobody there to be an advocate for you. And it's those people that are at the most risk of those kinds of scams and are most vulnerable to exploitation, neglect, and abuse.
What kind of things are people doing? I mean, so obviously one example I gave was people taking advantage of people online, of the elderly online, making them think they got to send a lot of money to fix something.
Right. And a scam is usually going to be indicated by a sense of urgency for the person that's trying to get you to send some money or gift cards or to do something. And always don't share information, don't click on links in emails. I mean, and phishing and these types of scams are a growing global industry, again, that affects millions of Americans every year. And one of the biggest challenges with enforcing this is a lot of times these people are overseas, so we don't have jurisdiction in some cases. In some cases, it is possible to extradite. The head of the CIA was taken by a scam and helped to investigate somebody who was actually arrested from overseas for threatening his wife, among other things. Wow. And just the scale and scope is staggering, but what is even more hidden behind that is most cases never get reported. You learned about what happened to Danae's grandmother, but more than 85%, it's estimated, of these types of scams never get reported. And one of the reasons is that somebody who's older may not want to report that they got taken by a scam, because then maybe it means that they're not able to live independently anymore. They're not able to manage their own finances without assistance. And that fear of losing their independence could be one of the reasons people are reluctant to report that they've been taken by a scam. And there's a secondary market. So if Danae's grandmother falls for that scam, then those people will sell her contact information to other scammers, and it just snowballs. Yeah. And if there's nobody to intervene or advocate or help cut off that contact, get a new phone number, change email addresses, they'll continue to be victimized.
Terrible. We didn't get to this when we first started, but like before we started recording, you mentioned kind of your story that sort of led you. I don't know if it led you to become a lawyer. It might have, but I'd love to hear the story of sort of how you got into the practice, and then sort of like your ambition to help sort of solve this problem, and what was sort of driving that.
From artist to lawyer.
Which I love. I mean, I didn't say that either, but like I'm a big fan of lawyers. I love the way lawyers think. I hear law school teaches you how to think like a lawyer. I'm a big fan of lawyers. So some of my favorite television shows are lawyer shows. So
people that don't like lawyers are on the other side of a lawyer adversarial process. So.
He also likes lawyers just in case he gets into a jam. He could be able to. He's got a Rolodex of lawyers he could call.
It's good to have lawyer friends.
Have someone call.
It is.
The people that like lawyers are the ones that need them. My own personal story that got me into this, it turns out it was faster, easier, and cheaper to get a law degree than it was to hold accountable my sibling for exploitation of my disabled mother. So I was adopted and raised by a disabled woman. And after she passed away, during probate of her estate, I learned that some things had happened before she passed away. And she was someone who would have been financially independent through a divorce settlement that she got when I was just a teenager, and at that time I was her primary caretaker. She eventually got older and bought a second home in Alabama, where my sister and her family were, and she wanted to help raise her grandkids and be closer to them. So she moved from Arizona to Alabama, and that's when the bad behavior started. And I didn't learn about any of this until after it was too late. And so that's what sort of was my wake-up call. I went into law school while litigation, which is still ongoing and not yet resolved, almost 10 years later. It's still going on. But I learned that what happened to my mother is not unique. It happens to millions of Americans every year. And so that was my wake-up call.
Yeah, so that's a particular example of elder neglect abuse that involves people close to them actually taking advantage of their finances, using those finances for their benefit rather than for the benefit of the elderly person, right?
Right. And the federal government has just recently started tracking instances, the occurrences of elder abuse and exploitation in multiple ways. And there's now a National Adult Maltreatment Reporting Study, NAMRS for short, which is, speaking of today being Election Day, elder abuse is a bipartisan issue. It's something that everybody should equally care about because it affects all of our families, whatever our political orientation or whatever our backgrounds. Family is the most important anchor, I think. And so it's important to realize, even as people age out, these issues continue to get worse over time. And so with the data that's being tracked now, we see that it's increasing year over year over year. And what that tells me is that the laws that should prevent this aren't good enough yet to stop these occurrences from happening. It's an easy crime to commit. It's an even easier crime to get away with, right? So one of my attorneys early in the litigation said, why would anyone ever rob a bank when it's so easy to steal money from an old person? And that's really, in reality, what's happening today.
I imagine, too, just with the holiday season coming up, there's probably a uptick of scams and things like that, with the holidays coming. And it seems like one of the impetus is to protection and security for our elderly. So what are some action steps that we should do if someone, comes across elder abuse?
So there are ways to report elder abuse if it's suspected, and there are agencies in every state, adult protective services agencies, that will investigate reports and determine whether or not somebody's vulnerable and at risk of exploitation. And if there's abuse, if there's something that's clearly happening, if somebody comes and they're bruised and you suspect something, call law enforcement, call 911 immediately. If it's non-emergency and somebody's maybe having trouble paying bills that they didn't have issues with before, something changes in their finances, or suddenly large gifts start disappearing from their accounts. Those non-emergency things can also be reported to Adult Protective Services or to the Attorney General's office or to your local law enforcement.
So you mentioned a couple of things there that kind of broaden out what we're talking about here. We've been mostly talking about elder abuse to the degree in which it is people being cheated out of their money. But there's also a sort of elder neglect, so people aren't actually being taken care of by the people who should be taking care of them, and also, actually people physical abuse as well. You talk a little bit about that particular issue as well, in terms of the degree in which those kind of things are happening.
Right. So under the laws of most states, a vulnerable adult, and that can be anyone who's 18 years of age and older, has heightened legal protection from abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And those are Adult Protective Services statutes that, again, every state and the territories all have. And in order to, I lost my train of thought, sorry. Ask me your question again.
So we've been talking about sort of elders being taken advantage of financially. Right. But talk a little bit about sort of in which elders get sort of neglected, there's neglect of care, or even worse, there's some type of physical abuse. Right.
So Adult Protective Services Acts cover exploitation, which is a financial harm. It also covers abuse, which would be physical abuse. Arizona law now covers emotional abuse. So if you're using verbal behavior that belittles or harms the physical well-being of a vulnerable adult, that is protected under the law now. And then just neglect. And neglect can be not providing food, not providing shelter, not providing medications that are needed, not refilling prescriptions at the pharmacy if you're a caretaker for an individual. So it covers that whole range of activities as well. And it happens fairly frequently. So, and there are, again, very large areas where there are variations. So long-term care facilities are regulated by multiple agencies, and the type of crime that's most difficult to find is when it's in a family, in a home, and there's no outside exposure that really brings the issues at light. So,
how much of this is an issue for those who are either unsheltered, right? That's one category of people, and who are elderly and unsheltered, and also others who maybe are, you mentioned sort of, you have no family members or whatever, you're sort of living on your own. what can be done to, I mean, that's a sort of a bigger question, because those are people who are sort of even especially disconnected.
Right. And I think you mentioned the temporarily unhoused population, and one of the fastest growing segments of that are seniors.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think one of the things that globally, as we look at the unhoused community and what causes that inability to pay utilities, is a predictor. Somebody who might get taken by a scam might not have enough money to pay their utility bills.
That's how they end up.
And rent, and then they're put out on the street. So that's a huge issue and something to be aware of.
So in some ways, elder care expands to thinking of people who fall into those scenarios, almost catching them before that happens, or even that's why at least what I've read is that sort of being aware when that's happening, or being very quick to respond if they can't pay rent and they're on the streets, making sure they're not on the streets for a long period of time, because it gets worse as time goes by.
Yeah, absolutely.
To what degree can some of this be caught ahead of time? Like, to what degree does Vermont had mentioned like this idea of being disconnected when you think, if the elder population isn't connected or is sort of like connected in a way that might be more toxic, if they're within a family that's taking advantage of them and that issue can't be brought to light, to what degree can some of the issue be sort of prevented with certain, like in certain contexts. Like I imagine like being within a community, obviously this is a church podcast. And so a big question that we're always thinking about is like, in what ways can the church serve or be present that could help sort of mitigate some of the issues that come in this type of abuse, especially when we have a, significant elder population within our own community here. So in what ways would you say, or have you seen, certain contexts sort of help mitigate some of this issue?
I think the most important tool and the most important prevention is education and being aware of the issue, being aware of the risks. And so even this podcast, letting people know that this is an issue and something to be aware of and to think about is a critically important step. June 15th is Global Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And that's an important sort of global initiative on educating people about the risks. So I think talking about it, I think being aware of your neighbors who are aging, being engaged with them to a certain degree, obviously without imposing yourself or violating privacy, but being a resource, being open to talk to them, being able to talk about these issues. And being taken by a scam isn't a sign of vulnerability necessarily. It's something that happens to young people and old people. But elderly may be more reluctant to talk about it or report it when it happens. And if it doesn't get reported, it doesn't get stopped. So I think just being aware of it, being aware that I've been taken by scams. I mean, they're sophisticated and getting more sophisticated. Artificial intelligence can be a tool used by bad actors. One of the most common scams that affects people is what's known as a grandparent scam, where somebody calls and says, "I'm your grandchild." Now with AI, they can use video to replicate a grandchild and say,
crazy.
"I'm in the hospital, I'm in jail, I need you to send me money so I can get out." And it happens all the time. So
That's
messed up.
It's frightening. Yeah.
Man, nobody better do that to my grandkid.
That's part of the thing when you go like, as the tools get more sophisticated, and I think it's the same way technology always does that. Technology opens the window to really positive possibilities, but we can't be naive to think that there aren't bad actors working just as hard to say, oh, well, we could use this
or harder
to take people. Yeah. So in a lot of cases, I'm often trying to have conversations with friends in all these different spaces and saying like, how do you be just as creative, if not more, to try to use these technologies as opposed to, because we can get caught in a lot of conversations saying like, oh, just stay away, just stay away, just stay away. But then we find ourselves behind the 8 ball getting taken by people who have said, oh, new technology, I'm going to use that for, very, sort of wicked schemes or insidious, situations versus trying to be creative as God's people to say, how do we use this in a way to create a better world? And again, to try to mitigate some of these issues. And so even as you talk about education, I'm always trying to think like, in what ways does even community, you mentioned being engaged with those who are aging, and, maybe just a few thoughts or like helpful tips for a community that is connected with their elders to say, hey, here are ways that, a community can just keep an eye on some of these things just to make sure, even if an elder is living alone, making sure that they feel safe to either report or to be open or to be transparent with the community, because how does a community do well to make spaces safe for their elders?
Right. I'll make two quick suggestions. I'm a huge advocate for intergenerational housing and for having intergenerational activities, things that involve all ages, from the very young to the aging. I just recently heard about a pilot in Europe where they're actually putting young college students in elderly housing facilities, and that's basically student housing. They work for a few hours a week, and so they're in this elder community, but they're working and they're learning, they're meeting, and they're talking to people. And so I think that's
great.
Intergenerational connection is critically important. One of the things to help prevent the sort of grandparent scam strategy is to have a family code word so that you and your grandparent or somebody in your family has a code word that only you know about. And so if somebody calls and says, hey, I'm in the hospital and I need money right away, you can use a code word in your family that no one else knows to help mitigate the risk of being taken.
That's good.
By the scam.
Yeah. Yeah, that first one, I think, just the importance of really ongoing relationship and connection, friendships and other things like that, I think is huge. I mean, I think Danae's grandparents lived with us, which is why I became aware of it. And then once I realized this kind of thing could happen to her, I said, okay, I'm taking over all your passwords, internet stuff. Anytime anyone asks you something like this, call me immediately. Yeah. And so that helped. That fortunately, I think that never happened again. I wish I was able to catch it that first time. But just even for a community like ours, the importance of asking questions, having friendships with people who are elderly, not sort of sticking with your own demographic, how important that is for them. And actually for us, we benefit as well from those kind of relationships.
I think too, just all this stuff is great, but when you think about diverse churches, right? That's a big thing. Diverse is a big word and it is very broad. But one thing that many churches are diverse in is chronologically diverse, meaning that there's intergenerational, multi-generational in our churches. And so this study or this thing in Europe that you were talking about, a lot of our churches are already set up to have this intergenerational fellowship and connection.
Well, I think you need to build fellowship. I mean, sometimes you can have it, but how do you make sure 20-somethings sometimes will still just hang out with 20-somethings?
Sure. Yeah. There's got to be some intentionality in that, but because churches are chronologically diverse, I think is a big help to help protect our elderly.
And knowing to ask these kind of questions and to sort of be curious about the lives of the elderly in their community, I think helps address these things, even as we hopefully laws help as well.
Right.
Well, this has been good, man. This has been a good topic, a very interesting topic. I think it definitely would fit into that stigma category, but also creating some awareness.
Yeah, Greg, if you could, we were talking offline, if you could provide just real quick information or websites, phone numbers that people can go to if they want to learn more information just before we wrap up, make sure they have that.
Yes. So the Arizona Attorney General's Office has a lot of great resources, including a task force. The Maricopa Elder Abuse Prevention Alliance has an I Will Challenge, which is about educating and preventing elder abuse and exploitation. People can visit www.azag.gov/issues/elder-affairs. And that's a large pot, but there's also a special section just on elder abuse and things to be aware of, how to report. Obviously, if there's an emergency and something's clearly wrong, call law enforcement, call 911. For non-emergency, an email people can send to the AG's office is seniorabuse@aag.gov.
Nice.
And phone number to report is 877-767-2385. And that is the Arizona Adult Protective Services Department.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. We'll put all that stuff in the
show notes description
that
if you want to know more.
Right. This has been a great episode. Thank you so much, Greg, for coming on. And for our viewers, like, share, comment, get in the comments. We'd like to hear what you have to say. As we always say, as we wrap up, love God, love people. We are out. Peace.